Hey y'all, my name is Priscilla and welcome back to my channel Bookie Charm. For today's video, I'm going to be reacting and reading the books for the Booktube Nonfiction Prize Quarterfinals round. Okay, so I'm interjecting in this video. This is Priscilla from the future because I'm filming this clip in June and the majority of this video and all these other clips were actually filmed in March, April, and early May. So I really want to address my support for the Black Lives Matter movement, the moment that we're living in now, for protesters and for all the Black booktubers out there that are really doing the work right now, even they don't have to share their experiences and ways that the booktube community and larger community, US world, should be paying attention and should be doing something for change. So I know it's really easy right now to feel helpless, to feel like you can't do anything today to make change. But I really hope and we'll be linking a bunch of resources in the description box below, because I feel like we all have a role to play in this moment. And if you're willing and able, of course, you should probably be protesting, but if that's just not for you or for some reason you can't do that, there's many ways you can help: signing petitions, providing monetary support with a number of funds that are supporting protests and other movements. You can also do the work. We're readers here, so let's read and educate ourselves and check our privileges and use our privileges to support the Black community and Black booktubers here on Booktube. I'm also going to be linking a playlist of Black booktubers that are speaking to this, that have posted videos, and I believe this playlist is being updated fairly regularly, and I highly encourage you to check that out, because we should really be uplifting those voices and listening and taking action based on the work that these booktubers are doing that they don't have to do, but we should be listening because they are. I will also shout out the Blackout Buddy Read that is being hosted by Shay on her channel. And I think that's another great way for nonfiction readers to get involved. If you need specific direction and some suggestions for 2 books, they will be reading these 2 books here. And I think that maybe that's a good way to get involved as well. Speaking to the Latinx community as a non-Black Latinx person myself, I think it's important for us to also every day do the work within our families, within our communities, our neighborhoods, and educating people and making sure that the focus is on the right subjects and that we address the anti-Blackness that is, in my experience, very prevalent in Latinx communities. So I think that that work is really important as well. So yeah, that's just a few ways that off the top of my head I can think of that you can help. So please check out all the information, and I'm gonna go ahead and awkwardly transition into the rest of this video. So you'll see my face again at the end of the video. So this video is going to be very similar to the video I had previously for the Octafinals, where I'm just going to be kind of reviewing the books as I work my way through them, telling you what I think, and at the end I do plan on ranking the titles. So for this quarterfinals round, I have been assigned Group D, and let's go ahead and run down those books pretty quickly. Of the titles, the first book that I have is She Said, Breaking the Sexual Harassment Story That Helped Ignite a Movement by Jodi, Kantor, and Megan Twohey. So this story is a journalist breaking story of the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault cases, and that sparked the hashtag #MeToo movement. I've heard this story is really great, obviously very timely and important, and this is the first duo that I'm going to be reading from for the prize. The next book that I have is called The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett and Graff, an oral history of 9/11. I actually read this book for my Octafinals round, and it came pretty high up in my rankings, so this is going to be increasingly hard to rank, I'm sure. But this is a just really fantastic oral history resource of September 11th that brought together so many different voices, and I felt really emotionally connected to. I just thought it was really, really well done. And the next book is Sea People, The Puzzle of Polynesia by Christina Thompson. And this story is described as sort of a detective tale, a history of the making and the people that inhabit Polynesia, which is a 10 million square mile area that has 3 points: New Zealand, Easter Islands, and another island that I'm forgetting. Obviously, I don't have a lot of knowledge of this area, and also the first contact with European explorers. The next book is called A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell. So this is the story of a woman that goes undercover as an ally spy and that helps garner interest in the resistance in World War II. Again, I'm not a historian, so this is going to be another interesting book for me. I'm going to be reviewing these books as a layperson that doesn't have a full grasp on history, so it's going to be interesting to see how these histories are presented in these books and how I get along with them. Next up, we have The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Treuer. And this also has the subtitle of Native America from 1890 to the Present. Another history book. It's really interesting that 3 so far of the 6 books that I'm assigned are all histories. And this is Own Voices for the Native American Indigenous representation. So I'm excited to see an Own Voices tale for this grouping of books. So this title is a play on the best-selling 1970 title of Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. And in that story, Native American history is told and ends with that massacre in 1890. So I think that this book, the narrative, is trying to dispel the truth that some hold that Native American history ends at 1890, because of course it doesn't, and it moves forward and exists in the present day. And lastly, we have Trick Mirror by Jodi Tolentino. I have actually read this book and I haven't actually reviewed it on my channel, so this is an exciting part of this vlog to tell you what I think about that book. But Jodi Tolentino is a writer. She's written on the internet for years and years and decades even, maybe. She grew up on the internet, writing on her live journal, on her blog, and many years at Jezebel. And I think that her take on culture and contemporary issues is just really intelligent and sharp and insightful. I remember feeling the same way I did about her essay collection as I did for Roxane Gay's Bad Feminist, which I do not say lightly because I think that they are both just really, really smart and really interesting stories and essays on contemporary culture. And Tolentino is also a woman of color. She's Filipina and also grew up in Houston, Texas. And I really felt a personal connection to one of her essays, especially that compares evangelical Christianity to Southern culture, specifically in Houston. And that essay, just amazing. And it's not even the best of the entirety of her essays. So really, really strong essay collection. Again, going to be really hard to rank compared to other books that are so entirely different. And those are the books. And I'm filming this vlog clip on April 26th. We're a month into this reading season of this quarterfinals round. Not too nervous about it because, again, I only have 4 books to read. I've already read 2. And I'm halfway through 2 books already. So I'll give you more thoughts about those 2 once I read more into them. This round is a little bit different because I usually pick up all these books from the library. I like to have the physical copies. And this time, of course, my library is closed. So I'm relying on my library's ebook holds and audiobook holds to come through in time. So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I'll see you in the next clip. All right, y'all, so it is May 3rd, so about a week since I last filmed an update for this video, and I finished a book. So I want to talk to you about The Heartbeat at Wounded Knee by David Treuer. This book, like I said before, is Own Voices. David Treuer is an anthropologist, and his father was Jewish and his mother was Ojibwe. So I think that I really want to emphasize how important it is that this is a history of Native American people from a Native American historian. And that narrative and that perspective and that lens of history is so needed and so important. And I feel like I learned a great deal from this book. This book really talks about how Native American people and Indian people, he uses the term Indian in his book, shaped the American politics, American framework of society, and continues to shape it moving forward into modern day context. It sounds daunting to write American history in a couple of 100 pages, and I thought it was just really well done, very succinct and to the point, but also just really highlights a resistance of people. The historical parts of this book, the previous to 1890, I think, provided a lot of complexity and nuance to these histories. I think in a lot of histories, we often see, Native Americans pitted against whoever it was, the French colonists, the British colonists, whatever war was taking place at the time. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing in war is ever that simple. Sometimes other tribes were facing off against each other, or tribes would team up with the colonists trying to gain some leverage. And I think that is painted pretty well in this book and detailed pretty well in this book. The overall message of this book is that you have to understand the history of a people's and of places to really understand the issues that they face today and what the future may hold and where we're going. While we discuss Native American history in terms of victimhood and death and massacres, you kind of kill them again over and over again by continuing on this story and this idea that was the end of Native American history. So to fight that, you need to tell stories about Native Americans now and the recent histories as well. So I could go on and on about certain discussions in this book that I thought were just so well needed, that I learned so much from, but I'll just mention a few here. I really liked the discussion of the Native resistance and how it was sort of modeled after the Black Panther movement in California. I really liked the whole discussion about blood quantum theory and Native American Indian identity politics. That is something that is going to be prevalent in our time and is prevalent now that we'll move forward on. This idea that the genetics and the blood that you have really defines who you are as a person, which I think we can all tell is just not true. There's a lot more to identity than just blood. It's culture, it's language, it's family, it's residence. It's a lot of things that aren't just quantified by blood. But this blood quantum theory in particular was brought out of this movement and this capitalism that invaded tribes and sovereign lands with gambling and with casinos that were brought up that were very profitable, and that people had to decide how they were going to be distributing this wealth in these economies. And it's just an easy way to excommunicate people and to remove people if you deem them not a part of you based on blood. So yeah, that whole discussion is just really fascinating, really sad, because you hear stories about, people that married someone outside of their tribe and that are no longer able to claim homes on their reservations because of this bottom query nonsense. It's really, really interesting. And again, I think I understand it a lot better now, because now I understand the history of where it came from. So just a really, really good book about how Native Americans have shaped the fabric of our contemporary society in the United States and how they will continue doing so in the future. So I think that this author just really brought up a lot of important, great questions that I don't think someone outside of his perspective could have brought up, could have mentioned and discussed in such great detail. And I really, really appreciate this book for that. So I think that I found my first 5-star read. I don't want to speak too soon. So that's enough of this book. I'm going to go on forever and ever about this book. But I am in the middle of 2 more books. So I'll say that I'll update you when I next finished another one. On a personal note, I have finally, I think, started to get my groove back of reading. I feel like really hopeful, really things are looking up, because I've started to really get into a routine of things, of working from home and living from home for a long time. Started going to the park again, now that parks are back open. Of course, being socially distant from people, but just really things are looking up. So I will see you in the next clip. So it is May 7th now, and welcome to my backyard. I realized that working from home and being inside so much is actually not good for me, and I've tried to incorporate going outside a little bit more the past week, and I feel like it's really good for me. So hello from my backyard. So unfortunately you'll have to bear with my squinty eyes because it is sunny out here, but it still feels pretty nice. So we're gonna go with it. So I finished She Said by Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey this week, and it was such a compelling and gripping story and investigative journalism that I ended up binging it, and it actually demanded more of my attention than the other Booktube Prize book that I was reading this week. Although I knew a lot about the Harvey Weinstein case just because of it making headlines and how many women were involved. I feel like it got a lot of media attention around the year 2018, despite knowing about some of the celebrities that were involved and some of the other details involved with this breaking story. I still wanted to read this book and understand how things came to be and how everything unfolded, because it was done so well, and I really appreciate the hard work that these two women at the New York Times put into breaking the story. So I really like how that insight was provided in this book, and how these women in many cases were very young and were trapped and coerced and silenced through a lot of legal systems and other power structures at play. That is really detailed in this book, and a lot of the private conversations, emails, documents are all portrayed in this book, so you get a lot of that firsthand reporting style in this story. And of course, now we know that Harvey Weinstein is a pervert, and I think good riddance that he is convicted and serving his time in jail, because a lot of that graphic sexual assault and harassment is detailed in this book, and it's very graphic, so take care if you want to read that, because I was disturbed reading some of those sections. But it just, I think, was important to lay out in the story like this, because it shows a pattern of behavior. And this isn't something that is just unique to Harvey Weinstein. It's a phenomenon in the Me Too movement. I think it's what sparked the Me Too movement, is seeing how similar so many women were reporting and detailing what happened to them. This book opens up with, I think, a context of the time with the 2016 election of Donald Trump, and how he was painted as a sexual predator, because he is, but moreover because of Stormy Daniels and his settlement with her. That context, I think, kind of seamlessly flowed into their reporting for Harvey Weinstein. But I will say one negative thing about this book is the last few chapters detail very briefly and abbreviated way the Kavanaugh hearings for his Supreme Justice Court appointment, and the testimony of Dr. Ford, who was allegedly assaulted by him, or attempted to be assaulted by him, when she and he were in high school together. I felt like while that's an important story to tell, while it does play into this Me Too movement of the time, because a lot of the things were happening at the same time, it felt like a bit of a change in pace. It felt like a bit of a steer in another direction, whereas most of this book was detailing the direct reporting of Harvey Weinstein. And I'm not saying that Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh and that whole case isn't important, because I think that we should be listening to all women that are ready to tell their stories. But I do think it was a departure from what this book was trying to do. I think that if this book was trying to be about the Me Too movement, then it should have been a broader scope, not just these two cases, Harvey Weinstein and Justice Kavanaugh. And of course, that's a really nitpicky thing, because it's very well written. This book is very good, and like I said, it's very gripping, and I highly recommend you read it if you want to know more about it, and if you want to hear other stories from women like this, because I think that can be empowering for women that didn't think that that thought that they were alone in this fight, because of course sexual assault and harassment and this toxic masculinity rape culture affects all women. So for that, I still recommend it, and I really enjoyed reading it for what it was, but I do think that it could have been better. So that's definitely going to play into how I rank this book. So I was reading another Booktube prize book while I picked up Me Too, but or She Said, I'm sorry. But I will definitely gather my thoughts about that and wrap that up for you in the next clip. Okay, hey y'all, so I'm filming inside today because I realized that I only like filming outside for like 5 minutes and then I'm done. And I had some technical difficulties, had to refilm that last clip like 3 or 4 times. And if my eyes are squinty that whole video. So I finished Sea People actually a good number of days ago, a week ago now, and I should probably tell you what I think about it now. So now, after having finished reading it, I understand why Goodreads and the author's synopsis for this book calls it sort of a detective story, because the entire book is slowly piecing together evidence, history, information, data that kind of unveils where the Polynesian Islands peoples, original settlers, indigenous peoples come from, how they got there, how they mapped the entire area with the Europeans and the explorers that came with the first contact with these people. So the Polynesian Islands, I had no history of, no reference point to, because the only point of reference I have for Polynesia is the movie Moana, and that tattoos are originally from Samoa, a Polynesian word language. And yeah, Moana does a really good job, I think, of kind of getting to the heart of Polynesian seafaring culture and their navigational skills and methods. So the Polynesian Islands were an area of the world in the Pacific that was untouched from outsiders for thousands of years. And to tap into that history and to understanding the making of this great area, this vast area, 10 million square miles of people, you have to look at it through a European lens, because a lot of that documentation, a lot of the questions that were asked were inherently outsiders' perspectives, questions that wouldn't be asked by the natives and indigenous folks of this area. I like how Thompson never belittles the native people and kind of plays this entire narrative through the story as an insider and outsider convergence of information. So a lot of the information presented from Polynesians is told through oral traditions and is told through the lens of these explorers that were asking the questions. And I think that she does a very good job of balancing it, although a lot of the information is just inherently from a white perspective, from an outsider's perspective. You know, in many cases, Europeans were very skeptical of the native oral traditions, of the accuracy of these stories, but oral traditions, I think, was my favorite part of how it was discussed in this book. Oral traditions are very historical, they're very intentional and purposeful, and answer a lot of questions of who did what and what were their motivations behind it. Whereas I think Europeans in this book are described as having questions of when and where, dates, specific data points that can be referenced and documented that the Polynesians don't care of. And although they don't have that specific sort of perspective, they do have a wealth of knowledge. There were accounts of certain priests, leaders in these tribes that could document 30 some odd generations back, thousands of years, hundreds of years, and lots of square miles of various islands that many had not traveled to, and they could easily map and navigate to because of the history and knowledge that they held in their minds. So this oral tradition is oftentimes misinterpreted and cannot really be interpreted fully to a Westerner's mindset, just because the methodology and way of thinking is different. And I think that Thompson does a very good job of refuting and dispelling a lot of those myths over and over again. Just when I think she's going to fall into this trap of going on and on about this European mindset, this historical take on these islands, she immediately will revert back to, and then the Europeans were too dumb to ask the right questions to get the answers they were looking for, kind of thing. Not really calling them dumb, I'm just paraphrasing, of course, but I appreciated that a lot, because I think that histories like this are oftentimes misguided and very biased, and I feel like she does a very good job of trying to dispel a lot of that. And I found out later, after watching an interview with the author, that she actually has a personal stake in this history, because she married a man from New Zealand of the Maori tribe, and of course their children are descended from Polynesians as well. So she definitely has a personal stake in the story, and I definitely think you can tell because she's just so respectful and never belittles the Polynesians. So I thought that that was the main takeaway of this book. It's this convergence of two different cultures trying to tell a singular history. And it's difficult to do. There's still a lot of mystery involved. There's a lot of data emerging now with technology, but of course, Indigenous peoples, rightfully so, are very apprehensive to, subdue themselves to maybe DNA testing and other technologies that could have more direct answers to directly where these people originally traveled from, because they were the original settlers from most likely Asia is as it's detailed in this book. So I do feel like I'm being a bit redundant in this, but I did learn a lot about Polynesia and the Polynesian people, and for that I think that this is a very rewarding read. I really liked the parts about sea navigating and understanding the different methods, the land finding methods they use, and how to read the stars, and water swells and wind patterns. That's all really fascinating and unique to Polynesian culture. I really loved understanding more and more about oral traditions. That's something that's deeply rooted in Polynesian culture, and I think a lot of indigenous cultures. So that's something I'm definitely going to take away from this book. I think the fact that this book is not for me, is not something I would naturally gravitate my way towards, but ended up really enjoying, speaks to how well the book is written. And for that, I'm grateful. But that's what I thought about Sea People. So I am taking a break from the Booktube Prize Reads. I have one book to read left, and it hasn't come in through my library yet. So if I don't get it over the next week or so, I'm gonna have to end up buying it on Amazon as an ebook most likely, because that's the only other way I'm gonna read it. And I really try to avoid doing that just because I'm a stickler for purchasing unnecessary items on Amazon, and especially full price books. I can't really justify buying a full price ebook on Amazon if it's not a pre-order. So I try not to do that, but I might end up having to do that, and we'll see what I think about the next book. So one more book to go, and I've got 3 weeks left in May, so in pretty good shape. But I will let you know what I think about that book when I read it in the next clip. Okay, y'all, so I'm back for this video. I'm going to close it out with the last book that I read, and of course my rankings of all the other books that I read for this group. So as I said before, we're in June, and it's taken me a week after finishing A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell to finally get on camera and tell you what I thought about it. In short, I didn't like it, and I'm gonna try to express why. I tried to sit with it and see if it was maybe I was burned out with all the other nonfiction reads, which I feel like has a sort of a part in why I didn't dislike it, but at the end I just didn't really like the story and how it was told. So this, spoiler, was the last book that I ranked. It was number 6 in my 1 to 6 rankings. So this book, I think, is mostly a biography of the woman named Virginia Hall, who was from New York. She moved to work in the British SEO, which is a spy, working as a spy undercover in France during World War II. And while I think she's an amazing person, and she definitely deserves to have her story told, because her influence in the work that she did was overlooked very often. And I think because a lot of her story was undercover, there's obviously not a lot of interviews. She didn't keep a diary. A lot of that story, from her own words, was just absent. The author mentions in the beginning of this book that she had to do a lot of digging, a lot of paper trails to kind of piece together her story and her time in Europe. Other work that she did, she mentions she interviews her niece and uses her niece's commentary to kind of fill in some of those gaps as well, where there wasn't paperwork or other documents that she could use to tell Virginia Hall's story. But I feel like this book, out of all the books, was the least nonfiction of all of them. And that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes I like books that kind of push the boundaries of the genre. But in this instance, when you're telling the story of someone's life, and when I feel like I'm constantly questioning myself, like how much creative liberty is the author putting in here to say with authority that this is what Virginia Hall thought, this is what Virginia Hall did because she felt this way. I wasn't sure how I felt about it the whole time. Will also mention there were instances of unchecked ableism in this book that kind of made me feel uneasy, because I remember there was an instance where she says that Virginia Hall would have otherwise lived an unsatisfactory life because of her disability. And I don't think that you have to put down other people to uplift your protagonist, the person you're telling, whose story you're telling. I don't think you have to do that. We know she's a badass. Tell us what she did, and that makes her badass, but don't put down the rest of her community. Things like that kind of stuck out to me because I was already just questioning everything else. So that's why I didn't like that as well. Okay, so I think this video is long enough. I'm gonna go ahead and run through the rankings that I went ahead and used for my ballot. We all know the books that made it to the semifinals, but I think it's interesting to hear how people ranked books anyway. So of course, I just told you number 6 was A Woman of No Importance. My slot number 5 went to She Said. My slot number 4 went to See People. And then third place was Trick Mirror. Second place was The Only Plane in the Sky. And first place was The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee. I absolutely love that book. That's the only 5-star book of all of these books. Most of these are actually 4-star books. And then I had one, I think I'm going to give it a 2 or 3-star book. So yeah, really strong group here. But I'm not going to be moving on as a judge for the semis or the finals. So this might be my last Booktube prize video. I may put out a video about the short list. I do want to continue reading some of the books from the long list. Definitely I want to read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and I'm really surprised that one didn't make it through. But yeah, that has been my judging experience for this round. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.